Okay, everybody, so this is going to be another dev work video. I did make a couple more of these. I'm not going to be uploading them for the simple fact that they both run over like 2-3 hours, and the only thing I'm doing is frustratingly toying with code to get movement handling to work. Since I kind of reverted all that code back to its original, there's no point uploading it. But we're going to do this video here. I'm going to show the implementation of an entity renderer. Now I've gone ahead and made the class. When you go to make an entity renderer, you need, of course, a render class. The most low-level render class you can possibly get is literally render entity. There's literally nothing in here other than it renders a box, and that box is the same size as the collision box of entity. If you've seen from my earlier videos, I'm working on the grappling hook. This renderer that I'm working on is going to be the grappling hook, of course, the thing that actually ends up sticking to the wall and you can see where you're rendering. Now from here, I'm of course going to get rid of the rendering box because of course the previous version it renders a little cube. That's not what we want to render. What we actually want to render is essentially a model here. So I'm going to copy these two lines. Now this isn't the model we're going to end up using. We actually have a separate model for the hook itself. Let me go dig through my folders here and I can go get the name of it. Okay, so what we are using is the actual grapple. This is the handheld item. It includes the hook on it. This is what we want. So we want to hit really quickly, grab the name of it. It's best when you're doing this kind of stuff just to copy the name directly rather than trying to manually type it in. If you want to manually type it in, it works, but more often than not, you'll make a mistake. The texture is the same, so we're going to use the same texture. Luckily, my asset developer knows how to double use textures properly. So if somebody changes the texture for the actual item, it'll go ahead and change the hook texture as well, which is really nice considering they're supposed to be the same model pieces, but in this case we have two separate models to simplify life. Because after all, this one is supposed to render, I think, closed, and the other one renders open. But we'll go ahead and toy with that and we'll get it all rendered. Now in this exact case, simply all we need to do is go model. Or actually, we need to go turn the texture down here real quick. We actually don't really need to return this, as I don't think Minecraft actually cares. What we do need to do is bind the texture. Okay, so we're going to do get entity texture for this real quick in case I make an override for this later. And we're just going to render the model straight out. So we're going to call model.renderAll. We are going to have to rotate this and we are going to have to adjust this. Luckily the rotation is really basic. We store the side by which we're going to be rendering the entity into the actual hook code. So all I have to do is register this real quick and I'll show it rendering and then we'll work on the rest of it. More than likely I'm going to have to do some packet sync code. Let me actually see if I can potentially get a head start on that. I need to implement I special, or I think it's I extra, it's not I extra entity property. It's I additional spawn data, I think is what it's called. Here we go. What this will let me do is I can, when the entity spawns, I can write data quickly to the packet that sends the entity to the client, and then it'll read back out, and then I can sync my hook between the two. This is going to be important as I'm going to transition how the hook renders and everything. So right now, how we're rendering the rope part of the hook is that we actually have a client hook handler here, and at the bottom of the client hook handler, we're calling this render method. We're spawning a particle, which is the rope. I'm going to transition this so that the rope is actually rendering from the hook to the player, as I feel this will be the easiest way, and this will actually cut down on my need to packet sync as much. Because essentially the entity by which is the hook is then responsible for the rope rendering, which means I do not need to sync a packet to tell the client, hey, there's a hook here, here, and here, because entities automatically sync from client to server. All they have to do is then tell the hook is like, here's your position, and here's the entity you're attached to, and it will auto-render. This will also help when I go to do dual hooks and triple hooks and stuff for the Terraria-inspired hooks, as I won't have to do any special handling. I just have to go, okay, we have 3 hooks, and that's it. There's no additional render code required. But in this case, we need to sync the hook to the client. I believe I already have a read-write method here, so this will save me some time. So what we want to do is do buffer dot write boolean. You always want to kind of write a boolean and saying like you actually have data. So in this case, if hook doesn't equal null, then you want to go if hook doesn't equal null again. Some people do a little different on this. I just do the check twice. The checks take like nanoseconds to run, so it's not too big of a deal. And then I just need to do hook dot write to buffer, and I'm done on that case. And then in here, we go if additional data dot get boolean, or actually it's a read boolean. This will go, hey, we have a hook or we don't have a hook. Now on the else statement, really quickly for this before we do the true statement, we want to set the hook to null. So in case we're syncing data back and forth, and for some odd reason we didn't have a hook when we spawned this, it will set this to null, which actually doesn't really make a difference here because this would have been null by default. But if we decide to recycle the additional spawn data for, say, a packet handler when we go to update the entity, say we go to update the entity's position or we go to null the entity out, we can handle that data. It's not important in this case, but when you're doing this kind of stuff, it's just to go ahead and implement it rather than not implement it. So hook equals hook.read additional data. So luckily for me, I already have all the setups. This is really simple. If I didn't have this all set up, we would have to implement all this here and all that. There is more data I've got to implement here now that I've actually going to be using the hook in this way. I do need to start keeping track of the player. There are several ways I can do this. I can be syncing the UUID, or I could just sync the username. I'm probably just going to sync the username most likely. But let's think of an easy way to do that. I'll get to that later because it's not as important. But we're syncing our data here, and this will get us at least our hook information to the client. And big important reason for this is I need to get this side variable here. This side variable will tell us what rotation we actually need to use. And that's about it. Yeah, that's good, that's good. And I now need to register in the client proxy the entity renderer, if I remember how to do that. I think I just need to call Minecraft Forge client register. Nope. It's probably something like entity render. It's been a while since I've actually had to register this stuff. Where I don't know how to do this, the easiest way is to just go ahead and look at one of my other mods. Okay, it's called render registry. And then where were we at? So right over here, put this here, and the implementation for that is the class, then the render. So this will be entity hook.class and then new render hook, or render hook is what it's supposed to be called. Why is it not finding that? What did I actually call it? Entity hook render is what I actually ended up calling it. Yeah, I guess that's fine. It's the naming convention isn't quite right, but I can fix it really quick here. So we go like this. Control F6, and then we can call it render hook. That'll fix that. So we keep with naming convention and close that, close that, close that. Only thing we need is the entity, and then we need our render method. Should reopen that right there. Okay, we can go ahead and launch, and theoretically this should render properly. If not, it'll crash and we get to start over from square one. Well, I would say square one, but we get to start over. Let's go throw that on my other monitor. This takes a couple minutes to load. While it's loading, I'm going to go ahead and start setting up the switch statements for the side. Actually, I need to do... So one, we need to do the rotation before we call render all. If you call render all, then you rotate, then you're just doing nothing. But first, we need to do entity instance of entity hook. More than likely, you'll never actually have to keep it in mind with this, but there are some cases where people will make mods like morph, but they won't be as good as morph, and they'll start calling weird render methods. So you'll have a mod that'll go, hey, I want to render the player as a hook. And then it'll call this method and it'll pass in a player instead of a fake entity like Morph, I believe, does. Actually, I've never really looked at Morse codes. I don't know if this is the way it does it. But it'll call it in, and if you don't check instance of, it'll crash. So it's always important to check instance of, although in most cases you really don't have to do it. Even Minecraft code doesn't do it. It assumes if you're calling this, it's the right method. But if you've got the extra time, you could just call it, and it saves you so much pain and effort. And it also lets you do, say if you want to recycle this code for something else, you can call it with a different entity, and it will still render the hook. So we need to get the hook data. So hook equals entity.hook. Import class. And we go if hook doesn't equal null, because there's a case it can be null in whatever reason. Then we want to get our side. So in this case, we're going to switch on the side. So we just do this. And then we have case 0, which will be, I believe, down. And then case 1, which is up. And then all the other cases, which I never bother to memorize. I believe that's north. I believe this is south. I believe this is west. I believe this is east. And we can check here like in 1 second. So these are all based on, technically forge directions based on Minecraft logic. So yeah, down, up, north, south, west, east. Yeah, I actually do have it memorized slightly. So we know which direction these are. However, we're going to have to guess on the rotation ourselves. It'll take us a few minutes to do that. We'll go ahead and put some break statements here. One of these we're not actually going to need, because by default the hook is going to be rotated to face one of these directions. Most likely it will be the north side, as most models are developed with the ideal of being north side. Also, we're adding these break statements. For those who are not familiar with how Java works, when you do a switch and it hits a case, it'll do the logic here, and if you don't put a break, it'll then go to case 1 and it'll do case 1's logic, and then case 2 will then do case 2's logic. So if you don't put the break, which then tells it to go down here, it'll sit here and it'll go through each one. Which sometimes is desirable, like say if case 0 and 1 were literally the same, I could then put these next to each other and leave out the first break one, and it'll hit the second one and then go to the bottom here. Let's see, is Minecraft finally loaded? No, but it's really close though. Go ahead and put a final statement here. Really, these final statements aren't needed, but that's a good ideal, good code practice that if you know you're not going to be modifying data, just put a final next to it. It saves you a little bit of headache later on if you decide to start doing weird things. And it literally just tells other people when they read your code is like, hey, this method or this variable is never going to change. But this looks good. I just got to add rotation calls between these, which if we open up item hook, I can go borrow the rotation calls. I think I need to actually call translate too. Yeah, I forgot to do that. We need to add this real quick. The translate just needs to be like this. And gotta cast these to floats. There is a method I think you can call, which is translate D, but I don't know if it does something different, so we're not going to use it. Now, what we could put in place here. And one more thing, I'm going to turn this back on, just so we can confirm that the translate was put in the right spot. And we're going to put this up here, and we're going to give it its own little GL push matrix and pop matrix. The goal of the push and pop matrices, by the way, it kind of sets up yourself a little render box where everything inside the push is going to be its own little thing, and then when you go to pop, you say you're done rendering. So if I do translate in here, and at the end when it goes to go pop, it's going to put the whole entire thing back to where the previous translate call was. So say if this whole thing was encapsulated in another GL call, and that GL call had translated to a certain position, when I go pop, it'll put that back to the position. So any translate calls will get removed, any rotation calls will get removed. It's a really good idea to kind of try to encapsulate your stuff inside of these. That way you're not messing with stuff. It's also a good idea that when you're rendering things, just to render them in segments like this too. So you got your first one, then you got your second one, and so on and so on. But let's hit reload to make sure that did load, and it looks like Minecraft actually is running now, so we can sit here and check to see if our renders are working. It's literally, I think, the last step I gotta do. I already adjusted the movement code, which I can show really quick. It's taken me a couple days to get it working to the point where I can call it good enough. I am going to have to spend more time with it, but right now the only thing that I need to get that doing is to kind of just pull you and hold you up in the air. Everything past that is optional. Okay, so we can tell for default that our grappling hook is ridiculous in size. But let's show the movement code real quick. It's a little jerky at first. It does stabilize. As you can also tell, the rope render is kind of a little weird where you can see through it. I will fix that later. That is not something I need to fix right now, but I can fix later. But the grappling hook render does need fixed. Unfortunately, I can't see where it's at. So let's go ahead and scale this down. We want to scale down after the translate call, that way the scaling factor doesn't screw with our translation factor. And if I recall right, the scaling factor is this right here. I was also told by my modeler that I may have to redo my scaling factors because I think he said he scaled the models down again when he went to go fix a few issues with the model. Let's go ahead and put that in there, and I believe that grappling hook is above me. Okay, so there's our hook there. Now, it should be attached to the north side of this block. And it's facing, okay, that's north, south. Oh, okay, it actually is designed, so we're not facing, this is the west direction. So if we actually pull this really quick and put this here, that actually is rendering perfect-ish. It needs to go up by a very small amount. So we're going to do this real quick. We did this last time. I did some render stuff so we can see stuff being rendered in real time. Let's go like that, and then we can look at it. So it does need to go up by a little bit. So in the Y direction, we'll do plus 0.2 F. That looks just about perfect. Perfect enough for the render, though. Reality, if I actually want this to work properly, I do need it to go a little bit more forward, but if I go a little bit more forward, then the grappling hook would go into the material and you wouldn't really see it well. In this case, it looks nice, although the entity itself is rendering almost a block above. That's because I think on the server, the entity is actually thinking it's there, and then on the client, we're transmitting the hook position here on the client, so it's not rendered. This is one of the reasons why I said I want to render the rope from here to the player, because then it's close enough that we can visually know where we're being pulled to. All we'll have to do is then fix why the entity is not rendering where it's supposed to be. We'll work on this a bit here later, but the rendering's good. I need to set the time of day. So time, set day, and then game rule, do, day-night cycle, false. And I have a mod, it won't rain, so this is really perfect now. So I won't have to worry about that. But that was the north side, so then we're going to do the south side here. Okay. So we need to rotate this by... So by the way, this is our default, we don't need that now. So it will be gl11.gl rotate f, and then I think we just want to do 180. That should work. It's not working as planned. Make sure I'm facing the right direction. So I'm facing north, which means it should be south, should be facing this side. Let's actually figure out what we're doing here. Oh, the hook thinks it's on side 3. Side 3 should be... Weird. It's not what it... Okay, let's hit play real quick and make sure we actually are testing this correctly. Okay, so Minecraft says I'm facing north. And that should be south. Let's make sure we actually hit the right side. Yeah, I mean, we're hitting the right side here, so something's not quite right. We can do some debug real quick. So Minecraft dot get Minecraft dot the player dot add chat message component, new chat message component, text, and then we just literally want to do entity dot hook. Actually, we want to make sure we move this down here, so let's grab this real quick. Actually, we can just, instead of doing it that way, we just put hook right at the end here. If the toString on the hook works properly, I should get a side variable with this. Let me go check just to be sure. Yeah, it does give me the side. It'll be... Let me add some data here so I can easily read it. Okay. Okay. Side is 4. What? My hook just went straight through the block. That was unusual. Yeah, it's like side is number 3. But then it said that side was 4, so there's something wrong with the ray trace. Let me get back in first person so I can see this properly. Yeah, it's like side is 3. Side is 4. It's not what I want to do. Side is 5. You know what? I'm thinking about this wrong. I just realized what I did. I keep forgetting that... So here, I listed out all the sides, and I'm like, hey, this is the bottom, this is the top, and I did it perfectly the first time. And then my brain just went stupid on me, and it's like, each one of these directions. I gotta list them out, or I'm gonna mess up again. So that's bottom. That's top. That's north, which we don't have to do anything with. And this is south. So this is the one we actually wanted in the first time, and me being slightly brain dead today. Probably from lack of eating stuff. I only got like 1 slice of pizza today. I had to nab that for my brother too. I made like a whole pizza and he just decides to steal the whole pizza in one go. Yeah, so there we go. It's rendering the correct side. Looks a little funky though. So the reason why we have that closed hook style for it is because if it hits one of these edges, it actually does look appropriate. But that looks good. Okay, so now this side should be... So should be the west side. So this is side 5. So right down here, put this here. I believe I just need to do